They fired her at 6:02 a.m. thinking she was obsolete. By lunch, she had taken their biggest client and $80 million with her. This is the story of why you never fire the person who holds the keys to the kingdom. But before we watch the bridge burn, I want to see who is grinding right now. Drop a comment below telling me where you are watching from and exactly what time it is in your part of the world. Let's get into it. The phone buzzed against the nightstand with the rhythmic warning of impending doom. It was 6:02 a.m. The sun hadn't even risen over the Chicago skyline, but apparently, foolishness woke up early. I looked at the screen. Preston VP Strategy. The title was laughable. The kid was 26, wore loafers without socks, and thought strategy meant repeating buzzwords he heard on a podcast while nursing a hangover. I cleared my throat and answered, "Dana here." "Yeah. Hey Dana. Look, this isn't working out." There was no introduction, no good morning. Just the static-filled voice of a Nepotism hire calling from what sounded like a hollow tunnel. Or perhaps his bathroom. "I'm sorry." I sat up, pulling the covers tighter. The air in the condo was freezing. The heating unit had been rattling for weeks, sounding much like the company's recent earnings report. You're too difficult to manage, Dana," Preston said. I could hear him chewing something. A bagel? Gum? The nerve of it. "My dad and I discussed it last night. We need agility. You are legacy infrastructure. We are pivoting to a leaner client approach. So, effective immediately, we're letting you go. HR will email the details." I didn't blink. I didn't cry. My heart rate stayed steady. That is the reality of working in high-stakes client relations for a decade. You develop a numbness to chaos. However, difficult to manage wasn't a critique. It was a confession of his incompetence. I was the one who remembered the investors' children's birthdays. I was the one who calmed the Sterling Group when our technology failed last November. I wasn't legacy infrastructure. I was the structural support beam. "Noted," I said. My voice was flat, lacking the panic he likely expected. I think he wanted a fight. He wanted me to beg so he could feel like a powerful executive instead of a boy playing with his father's money. "Okay, well, good luck," he stammered, clearly confused by my lack of emotion. The line went dead. I stared at the phone. My career at Optima Holdings, 10 years of effort, sweat and missed holidays, ended by a kid who probably thought EBITDA was a vacation spot. Now, before I explain how I dismantled his kingdom using only a cell phone and strong coffee, do us a small favor. If you enjoy stories of corporate justice, hit subscribe and leave a like. It fuels our work and helps us tell more stories about why you shouldn't provoke the experts. Thanks. I didn't go back to sleep. I didn't cry into my pillow. I got out of bed and walked straight to my home office. The monitor glow was the only light in the room. My access hadn't been cut yet. Amateurs. Preston fired me at 6:03 a.m. IT didn't arrive until 8 a.m. The automated access removal script typically executed at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. This provided a window of nearly 3 hours where I was formally terminated but still active in the system. A ghost in the machine. I logged into the CRM. My typing broke the silence of the apartment. I avoided deleting files. That is illegal and amateurish. Deleting data leaves a digital footprint and signals a disgruntled employee. I wasn't disgruntled, I was strategic. I navigated to the client notes section. This section held the company's true value, not the contracts. Contracts are merely paperwork. The notes were the asset. They contained the soft intel. Which investor needed reassurance during a divorce, which CEO preferred texts over emails, or the specific vintage of scotch to send Mr. Sterling when the market dropped. I did not download the list, as that triggers data loss prevention alerts. Instead, I opened the files and relied on the photographic memory I had developed over 20 years. I didn't need a flash drive. I needed coffee. However, I did take one specific action. I accessed the calendar for the upcoming quarterly review. The meeting Preston was leading next week to prove his worth. I didn't delete the event. Instead, I uninvited the key stakeholders and disabled the notification that would alert Preston to the change. To the system, it looked like a glitch. To the investors, it appeared the meeting was cancelled. On presentation day, Preston would face an empty room. I logged out at 6:45 a.m. just as the sun began to rise. I walked to the kitchen and ground some coffee beans. The sound was aggressive but welcome. Difficult to manage, I whispered. Preston had made a significant calculation error. He believed my value lay in the database. He assumed the client list was a simple spreadsheet he could hand to a junior associate. He failed to realize that I was the list. The relationships were tied to me, not the company logo. He hadn't just fired an employee. He had disconnected the company's nervous system. The coffee was hot and tasted like freedom. I had 2 hours before the business world woke up. Time to formulate an exit strategy often taught in business schools as a warning. I picked up my phone. I wasn't calling a recruiter. Recruiters are for those who need jobs. I needed leverage. I scrolled past family numbers and stopped on a name I hadn't called in 3 years. Marcus Thorne. He was the regional director at Apex Capital. A $700 million competitor Optima had been trying to undercut for years. Marcus had attempted to hire me 5 times. Previously, I told him I was loyal to Optima's vision. Now, loyalty felt like a naive concept used to exploit workers. I watched the clock tick to 6:58 a.m. I wasn't just leaving. I was taking the foundation with me. By 7:30 a.m., I was standing at 4th and State watching my dog, Buster, inspect a fire hydrant with a focus Preston lacked. The city was waking up. Delivery trucks idled and commuters rushed toward their offices. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't one of them. I was independent. I held the leash in one hand and my phone in the other, hovering over Marcus Thorne's number. There is a specific etiquette for calling a competitor. You don't call during office hours, which looks desperate. You don't call after hours, which is intrusive. You call during the power window, that time between the gym and the first meeting. I dialed. It rang once. Dana. Marcus's voice was crisp. No confusion, no hello. He knew exactly who was calling. That is the difference between a professional and an amateur. Morning, Marcus, I said, as Buster finished his morning routine. I hope I'm not interrupting your meditation, I said. I was just finishing an espresso. To what do I owe the pleasure? Finally letting me buy you that lunch. I'm actually free for breakfast, I replied. Or more accurately, I'm free for the foreseeable future. As of about 90 minutes ago. Silence hung on the line, a heavy silence like a shark sensing blood. They fired you? Marcus asked, his tone dropping. Preston did. Said I was too difficult to manage. Wanted to pivot to agility. Marcus let out a bark-like laugh. Agility. That's cute. That's what people say right before they drive off a cliff, because they fired the only person who knows how to use the brakes. I'm not calling to vent, Marcus. I know. You're calling because you know that I know Optima's entire Q1 strategy relies on 3 key accounts. Accounts that, if I recall, only take calls from you. It was refreshing to talk to an adult. I'm not confirming or denying anything, I said, keeping it legally vague. I'm just saying that I am currently a free agent. But your non-compete? I paused for effect. Well, let's just say Optima's HR department has been a revolving door for 5 years. The paperwork for my last promotion in 2019? I'm pretty sure it's currently a coaster on someone's desk in the Cayman Islands. They never signed the updated terms. So I'm wide open. Name your number, Marcus said without hesitation. No, let me check with the board. 20% bump on base. Senior VP title. And I want full autonomy on the Sterling account if they decide to migrate. Done, Marcus said. I'll have the offer letter in your inbox in 10 minutes. Can you start Monday? I can start now. Even better. I've got a 10 a.m. strategy call. I'll send you the Zoom link. Don't say anything, just show up. I want to see the look on my team's face. See you then. I hung up at 7:42 a.m. I had been unemployed for exactly 1 hour and 40 minutes. In that time, I had secured a raise, a promotion, and a front row seat to my old company's collapse. I looked down at Buster. Good boy. Let's go home. Mommy has to put on a blazer. Back in the apartment, the adrenaline settled into cold resolve. I showered, scrubbing off the feeling of Preston's voice, and put on my armor. A charcoal suit, silk blouse, and the pearl earrings I bought after closing the Anderson deal. I checked my personal email. The offer letter was there. Timestamp 7:55 a.m. Marcus didn't mess around. I signed it digitally. My hand didn't shake. At 8:55 a.m. my Optima phone buzzed. Remote wipe initiated. Device will reset in 60 seconds. I watched the screen go black as the Apple logo appeared, wiping away 10 years of data. They thought they were hurting me. They thought erasing the phone erased the threat. I picked up my personal phone, the one I had just used to sign a contract with their biggest rival, and opened LinkedIn. It was time to light the match. I didn't write a scathing tell-all. That's unprofessional. Corporate warfare is subtle. I typed. After 10 incredible years, I'm closing the chapter at Optima. It's been a journey. While I'll miss the teams I've built, sometimes you outgrow a space that can no longer support your vision. I am excited to announce that I've accepted a senior VP role at Apex Capital, starting immediately. To my clients, you know where to find me. Everyone else, let's build something real. I hit post. The vacuum effect had begun. I poured a second cup of coffee and waited. It didn't take long. By 10 a.m., my post had more engagement than Optima's last 3 product launches combined. The corporate world is a small village. Everyone loves a train wreck, especially when the conductor is a 20-something with a trust fund. Comments flooded in. Huge loss for Optima, commented a logistics CFO. Can't wait to see what you do at Apex, wrote a vendor who despised Preston. But the real action was in the DMs. 2 major investors emailed me privately. Where are you headed? We need to talk. Does this mean the Q3 restructure is off? Call me. I didn't reply immediately. Silence is leverage. I wanted to look like I was already busy fixing someone else's problems. Then came a text from Chloe, a junior analyst I mentored. Chloe, 10:14 am. Oh my God, Dana, tell me it's not true. Chloe, 10:14 am. Preston just walked out of his office looking panicked. He's asking IT for your laptop password. He says you compromised the database. Chloe, 10:15 am. Did you give someone the list? Everyone is freaking out. I sipped my coffee. Poor Chloe. She was witnessing the meltdown in real time. Me? I didn't give anyone anything, Chloe. I just left. The list is in the system. Tell him to check the cloud backups. If he can figure out the password. Chloe. He's screaming at the CTO. Clients are emailing asking why their scheduled calls are disappearing from the calendar. Dana, what did you do? Me, nothing. I just stopped holding the ceiling up. I felt a twinge of guilt. Chloe and the support staff were collateral damage in Preston's ego trip. But you can't save everyone when the ship is sinking. Sometimes you can only point out the lifeboats. Me? Update your resume, Chloe. Send it to me tonight. I put the phone down as the Zoom meeting for Apex Capital started. Click join. The screen populated with faces. Marcus looked smug. His team looked confused. And that's why, Marcus was saying, we need to figure out a way to bypass their relationship manager. He stopped when he saw me. Morning everyone, I said, adjusting my camera. Sorry I'm late. Traffic from the bedroom to the office was a nightmare. The silence was exquisite. Everyone, Marcus said, grinning. Meet our new senior VP of Client Relations. Dana, why don't you tell the team why they don't need to worry about bypassing the relationship manager anymore? Because, I said, leaning into the microphone, I am the relationship manager. And I think Mr. Sterling is expecting a call from us around lunch. The marketing director looked a mix of awe and terror. They knew who I was. Now I was sitting at their table. Back at Optima, the chaos was unfolding. Without me to filter the noise, investors were going straight to Preston. Preston, who didn't know Mr. Sterling hated small talk. Preston, who didn't know the reporting format required for Sterling's eyesight. I muted myself and watched the chaos unfold in my mind's eye. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. Except I had cut the brake lines myself. At 10:45 a.m. my personal cell rang. It was a number I recognized. Richard, the CEO of Optima and Preston's father, the man who authorized my termination because his son found me difficult. I let it go to voicemail. Rule number 1. Never take the first call. Let them leave a message and record their desperation for posterity. A minute later, the voicemail notification appeared. Dana, it's Richard. Call me back. There is some confusion regarding the client transition. We need to clear this up immediately. Confusion was a polite word for a hemorrhage. I deleted the voicemail. I wasn't difficult to manage, Richard. I was simply impossible to replace. The issue with poor leadership is that it remains invisible until a crisis hits. When the market is up, anyone can run a company. When the storm arrives, you discover who is actually steering the ship. At Optima, it was already pouring inside the conference room. I wasn't there, obviously. I was at home browsing the Apex internal wiki. However, the industry is a whispering gallery, so I knew exactly what was happening. Around 11:30 a.m., a friend in Optima's accounting department texted me. Preston is sweating through his shirt. 2 investors just ghosted the strategy kickoff. I smiled. The glitch had worked. When I uninvited the stakeholders from the calendar earlier, I didn't just remove them. I removed the video link from their invites but left it on Preston's. Preston was currently sitting in a Zoom room staring at his webcam, waiting for people who were wondering why the meeting had disappeared from their calendars. He couldn't call them because he lacked their direct lines. He only had general office numbers manned by assistants trained to block unsolicited calls. He's blaming the server, my source texted. He's yelling about a Microsoft outage that only affects him. I took a bite of my bagel. The schadenfreude was delicious. The real blow arrived 20 minutes later. Vanguard, a major manufacturing client, was part of a complex deal relying on precise timing. I had managed the Vanguard relationship for 6 years. Alina, their VP of operations, trusted me implicitly because I once physically drove a hard drive across state lines at 3 a.m. to save her audit. Alina dislikes surprises, and she definitely disliked Preston. My new email at Apex pinged. From Alina Rodriguez at Vanguard Corporation to Dana Evans at Apex Capital. Subject: lunch. Body: just heard the news. Their loss. We're removing Optima from the pending deal chain effective immediately. The official reason was operational instability. The unofficial reason? The new kid called her sweetheart on a voicemail. Let's talk transfer protocols. I forwarded the email to Marcus with a single note. Incoming. Back at Optima, this triggered a seismic event. When a client like Vanguard pulls out, revenue projections drop instantly. Preston was likely watching the dashboard numbers tick down like a bomb timer. The CFO would be wondering why the agility strategy looked so much like bankruptcy. It's a glitch. She must have sabotaged the data. Preston was probably screaming. It is easier to blame a saboteur than admit incompetence. But I hadn't touched the data. They had the phone numbers and emails. What they lacked was context. They didn't know not to call Mr. Henderson on Tuesdays during his dialysis. They didn't know the Blue Sky CFO blocks emails containing the word synergy. I was the context. I was the metadata. My phone rang again. Optima Legal. Hello, darkness, my old friend. I muttered and answered. Miss Evans. It was Gerald, the general counsel, a man who had been asleep at the wheel since 2015. We have reason to believe you are in violation of your employment agreement. We see activity indicating you are soliciting clients. I'm not soliciting anyone, Gerald. They are calling me. There is a difference. You have a non-compete, he barked. Section 4, paragraph 2. You are barred from working with any competitor for 18 months. Gerald, I said, keeping my voice soothing. Do you have the signed copy of that agreement? Or is it in the box of files lost during the 2019 move? I seem to recall HR asking everyone to re-sign their documents, and I seem to recall forgetting. Silence followed, the kind that costs billable hours. I'm looking at the digital record, he blustered. The digital record says pending signature. Doesn't it? I guessed. It was an educated gamble. We will bury you in litigation, Gerald threatened, losing his composure. You can try, I said. But while you are drafting a lawsuit, Vanguard is drafting a termination letter. You might want to focus on that. I hung up. My hand trembled slightly, not from fear but from anger. They thought they owned me. They thought a piece of paper they couldn't even find superseded my right to earn a living. I took a deep breath. Let them swing, I whispered, echoing the advice my new team would give me. I turned back to my Apex laptop. I had real work to do. The VP's son was sweating, but I was just getting started. A cease and desist letter appears intimidating if you don't know how to interpret it. It uses all caps, bold fonts, and phrases like immediate irreparable harm. to induce panic and force a surrender. The email from Optima Legal arrived at 1 p.m. with an attachment titled, Urgent Evans C&D. I didn't panic. I forwarded it to Marcus with the subject line, Fan Mail. 3 minutes later, Marcus entered the Zoom room with a woman who looked formidable. Dana, Marcus said. Meet Sarah, our general counsel. She just read your letter. Sarah adjusted her glasses. It's cute, she said, her voice dry. They are citing a 2014 contract template that was invalidated by 2022 state labor laws. Also, they misspelled proprietary twice. I exhaled, relieved. So I'm good. You're better than good, Sarah grinned. You're a ghost. I called a contact over there. Apparently, Gerald is tearing the HR archives apart looking for a physical signature from you post-2018. They can't find it because it doesn't exist. I explained that during the merger, HR was a disaster. Files were lost, and while they sent a digital link to update records, I never clicked it. I was too busy saving the Vanguard account while Preston was busy expensing personal entertainment as client development. Priorities, I said. Well, their incompetence is our immunity, Sarah laughed. Let them sue. By the time they get a court date, you'll have moved half their portfolio. I'll draft a professional refusal. She left the frame and Marcus looked at me. You okay? I'm fine, I said. It just adds insult to injury. They fire me. Then sue me for finding a new job. That's corporate, Marcus said. They don't own the relationship, Dana. They just rent the space where it happens. You're the landlord. I like that. I'm the landlord. Back at Optima, the threat was collapsing. My phone buzzed with a text from Chloe at 1:45 p.m. Chloe. Gerald is screaming. HR is blaming IT. Preston is hiding in his office and canceled the all-hands meeting. The stock is down 2%. Rumors say we lost Vanguard. Me watched the news. I felt a cold resolve. They were using legal threats to stop a self-inflicted wound. However, the real battle was psychological. I decided to send an email, not to Preston or Gerald, but to the board of directors using my personal Gmail. Subject, transition. Dear board members, as you may have heard, my tenure at Optima has ended abruptly. However, I am currently being blocked by legal threats from the executive team. If you are wondering why key accounts are unresponsive, please direct your inquiries to Preston. I am happy to assist provided the legal harassment ceases. I hit send. It was a polite grenade. The board focused on stock prices, not daily operations. I knew one of them would call Preston's father to ask why his son was destroying the company. Money runs away from noise, and Optima was currently the loudest place on Wall Street. By 2:30 p.m., 3 major investors froze their activity. Roughly $40 million in capital paused. It wasn't death, but it was a heart attack. I sat in my living room, officially on board to Apex, watching Optima trend on finance blogs with headlines questioning their stability. The phone rang. It was Richard, the CEO. Dana, Richard said. He sounded tired and old. I got a call from the board. They forwarded your email. Hello, Richard, I said, keeping my tone neutral. I assumed they might. What are you doing, Dana? You're poaching clients. You're violating your contract. I'm accepting calls, Richard. There's a difference. And regarding the contract, ask Gerald about the missing 2019 files. Preston says you stole the client list, Richard said, his voice hardening. He says you downloaded the database before you were locked out. Preston lies, Richard. You know that. He lied about his GPA and he is lying now. I didn't steal anything. The list is in the system. The relationship's left with me. You can't copyright trust. There was a long silence. Richard knew I was right. That was the tragedy of it. He was a smart man who made one fatal error. He loved his incompetent son more than his company. Stop this, Richard said almost pleadingly. Come back. We can work this out. Consulting basis, higher rate. Just fix the bleeding. I can't do that, Richard. I've already accepted a position at Apex. Apex. The word came out like a curse. You went to the competition in 6 hours? They made an offer. They didn't call me difficult, they called me essential. It's amazing what respect does for loyalty. I will destroy you, Richard said, desperation turning to malice. I will spend every dollar I have to bury you. You're already losing dollars, Richard. I wouldn't waste the ones you have left. I hung up. My hands were shaking again, but this time from adrenaline. I had just told a CEO to go to hell. It was exhilarating. I turned to my Apex team chat. Me CEO just called. Panic bargaining, then threats. They are scared. Marcus, good. Keep pressing. I'm going to play the ace. I was emailing Sterling. Mr. Sterling was the whale. A legacy investor with Optima since the 90s. He was old money, old school, and famously grumpy. He hated change, but he hated incompetence more. I drafted the email with no subject line, just his name. Mr. Sterling, I wanted to personally inform you that as of this morning, I am no longer with Optima. It was not my choice to leave, but it is my choice where I go next. I am now at Apex Capital. I know you value continuity. I know you hate the dashboard interface Preston is pushing. I know you just want your dividends on time without a strategy pivot. I'm having lunch at the grill tomorrow, 12:30. Table 4. If you're hungry, I'd love to buy you a steak. If not, it was an honor serving you. Dana, I hit send. This was the risk. If Sterling stayed, Richard could stabilize the ship. If he left, the ship would capsize, signaling to the entire market that Optima was unsafe. I waited 2 minutes. My inbox pinged. From Arthur Sterling to Dana Evans at Apex Capital Body. I like my steak rare. See you at 12:30. I let out a laugh that sounded like a sob. This is what panic smells like, I said aloud. I forwarded the reply to Marcus. Me, you just earned your bonus. Back at Optima, I imagined Preston explaining to his father why the legacy infrastructure was currently eating his lunch. The grill is a Chicago institution where deals are made, or in my case, where revenge is served rare. I arrived at 12:15 p.m. to be seated at table 4, away from prying eyes. At 12:30 sharp, Arthur Sterling walked in. He was 72, carrying a cane that looked like a concealed weapon. He spotted me and smiled genuinely. Dana, he said, easing into the booth. You look lighter. Unemployment suits me, Arthur. I signaled the waiter. Sparkling water for me. Scotch neat for the gentleman. The 18-year. He nodded in approval. You remember? I remember everything. That was my job. We ordered and made small talk about the weather and sports. We didn't mention Optima until the steaks arrived. Arthur cut his fillet with surgical precision. So, he said, not looking up. Preston. Preston, I agreed. The boy is an idiot, Arthur said calmly. I told Richard that when he hired him. Nepotism is fine if the kid is smart. If the kid is a fool, it's suicide. Richard didn't listen. He wanted to modernize. Agility, I said, sipping my water. He wanted to play dress up, Arthur scoffed. He called me last week. Told me my portfolio was over-indexed on traditional assets and I should look into crypto. Me? Arthur Sterling? Crypto. He shook his head. I didn't fire him then because I knew you were the firewall. I knew you'd filter out the stupidity. I tried, I said. But the firewall got unplugged this morning. Arthur looked at me, his eyes dangerous. I never trusted the VP. I trusted you. You called me during the '08 crash to tell me not to sell. You fixed the tax error in 15. You, not the logo. I'm at Apex now, Arthur. They respect the work. They don't think I'm difficult to manage. Difficult? Arthur chuckled. That's what weak men call strong women. My first wife was difficult. She also built half my empire. He took a sip of scotch. I'm moving the fund, Dana. I felt the air leave my lungs. All of it. All of it. The papers are with my lawyers. You'll have them by end of day. That's $80 million walking out the door. Richard will have a stroke. Richard needs a wake-up call or a retirement plan. Arthur leaned in. But here's the thing, Dana. I'm not the only one. The terrifying thing about country clubs is that we talk. The Davis family, the Hendersons, the pension fund guys, we were all waiting for you to make the first move. If I go, they go. I'm the bellwether. Once the Sterling money moves, the herd follows. He raised his glass. To agility. I clinked my glass against his. To agility. I hadn't just stolen a client. I had triggered a bank run. I looked at my phone. 3 missed calls from Preston and 1 text at 12:45 p.m. Can we talk, please? Trouble? Arthur asked. Just the past trying to catch up. I'll let it go to voicemail. Good girl. Now tell me about this Apex group. Do they have good scotch? The best, I lied. I'd make sure Marcus bought a crate by tomorrow. I walked out feeling 10 feet tall. I had entered as a fired employee and left as the architect of a revolution. But the final blow would land at the quarterly call. By 3 p.m. the atmosphere inside Optima must have been crushing. I was back at my desk, watching the $80 million transfer request come through. Chloe sent a text that felt like a war dispatch. Chloe, 3:15 p.m. It's a bloodbath. Richard is screaming at Preston in the boardroom. Preston is actually crying. The CTO audited your logs and told them you didn't touch a thing. He said, she didn't delete the data. She just took the passwords to the relationships. Richard threw a stapler. She took the passwords to the relationships. It was the most poetic thing the CTO had ever said. They wanted a crime, a deleted folder or stolen drive, to make me the villain. But there was no crime, just competence leaving the building. Staffers were updating their LinkedIn profiles. I saw 3 connection requests from Optima VPs. Rats swimming toward the lifeboats. Then Marcus called, suppressing a laugh. You won't believe who just called me. Preston. You're kidding. He called the main line, unhinged, threatening a lawsuit for tortious interference. I put him on speaker for Sarah. She laughed so loud he hung up. He's desperate. He knows Sterling is gone. Oh, he knows. Richard is trying to freeze the transfer, claiming administrative review. It buys them 24 hours, but the trust is gone. Listen, the quarterly investor call is tomorrow morning. You should listen in. I wouldn't miss it. At 5 p.m., I received one last email from Preston to my personal account. Subject: Nonebody. You ruined everything. I hope you're happy. You're vindictive. I stared at the screen. He still thought this was personal. Reply: I didn't ruin anything, Preston. I just stopped fixing what you broke. Good luck on the call tomorrow. I closed my laptop, poured a glass of wine, and stood by the window looking out at the Chicago skyline. Somewhere in those glass towers, Preston was spiraling. He was likely staring at declining charts, empty calendars, and a phone that wouldn't ring. He had fired me because I was difficult to manage. He was about to discover that the only thing harder than managing me was surviving without me. The sun set, and the city lights took over. Tomorrow was the quarterly call, the final act. I took a sip of wine. Here's to Preston, I whispered. The Optima Holdings Q3 investor call began at 9 a.m. sharp. I was sitting in my new corner suite at Apex, overlooking the river. The coffee was better here, and the air felt cleaner. Marcus sat opposite me, feet on the desk, grinning like a child on Christmas. We dialed into the conference bridge as anonymous guests. Welcome to the Q3 earnings call. The moderator's automated voice intoned. Please hold for the CEO, Richard Vance. Richard joined the line. He sounded as if he had aged 10 years in 24 hours. His voice was thin and raspy. Good morning, everyone, Richard said. We have some updates regarding our strategic outlook. As you know, we are pivoting to a more agile client management structure. I could hear the tremor in his voice. He was reading a script Preston had likely written, and he didn't believe a word of it. We are streamlining operations, Richard continued, moving away from legacy infrastructure to a digital-first approach. Marcus mouthed legacy infrastructure at me, suppressing a laugh. However, Richard said, we have experienced some short-term volatility in our portfolio retention. We are addressing these issues. The floor opened for questions. Usually these calls are tame. Not today. This is Michael from the pension fund, a booming voice interrupted. I knew Michael. He was a no-nonsense operator. Richard. I'm looking at the transaction reports. I see an $80 million outflow pending from the Sterling Group and rumors of Vanguard exiting. Can you explain how streamlining operations resulted in losing your 2 biggest anchors in a single day? Dead silence followed. I heard papers shuffling and imagined Preston frantically scribbling notes to save his father. Michael, that is a temporary reallocation, Richard stammered. We are in discussions. It doesn't look temporary, Richard, Michael interrupted. I spoke to Arthur Sterling this morning. He said he moved because, and I quote, the only person at Optima who knew how to read a balance sheet was fired yesterday. Marcus pumped a fist in the air silently. We had to make personnel changes, Richard said, his panic rising. Dana was. She was difficult to manage. She wasn't aligned with the vision. The vision? Another investor cut in. Richard, the vision looks like bankruptcy. If she was the one holding the Sterling account, why the hell did you fire her before securing the asset? She must have. Richard was spiraling, going off script. Who gave her the client list? Someone must have leaked the list. It was the cry of a dying king. She didn't need the list, you fool, the investor shouted. She was the list. The call descended into chaos with voices overlapping, questions about stock prices, and demands for Preston's resignation. I pressed the end call button. Silence returned to the office. Well, Marcus exhaled. That went well. Better than expected, I admitted. The stock is down 12% in pre-market, Marcus said, checking his phone. Richard is done. The board will remove him by noon. Preston will be lucky to get a job at a car wash. I looked at the river churning below, gray and cold but moving steadily forward. I didn't feel vindictive anymore. I felt correct. The universe had fixed an error. Competence had won. So, Marcus said, standing up. Lunch? I think Sterling is expecting us to celebrate the transfer. In a minute, I said. I have one last email to answer. I opened my personal inbox. It was a message from Optima's chief compliance officer, Sarah. A different Sarah, but equally sharp. She was the one person at Optima who had tried to warn Richard about Preston's creative accounting years ago. From S. Miller at Optima to Dana Evans at Apex subject. Resume body. I assume you're hiring. I have the files on the regulatory breaches Preston ignored. Thought they might be useful for your due diligence. I can start Monday. I smiled. Reply, see you Monday, Sarah. I grabbed my coat. Ready? Marcus asked. Ready, I said. I walked out of the office, my heels clicking on the polished floor. I didn't look back. I didn't need to drink alone or gloat. I had my dignity, my clients, and the satisfaction of knowing that somewhere in a cooling office tower, Preston was finally learning the most important lesson of business. You can fire the employee, and you can delete the email account, but you can never fire the truth. And the truth is, I was never difficult to manage. I was just too good to be led by a fool. I hit the elevator button going up. Have you ever worked for a Preston? If you've ever had a boss who didn't realize that you were the strategy, I want to hear about it. Drop your story in the comments below. Let's vent. And if you enjoyed watching competence win over nepotism, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about corporate justice.